So if you have already had your first baby, you have probably been asked, so when are you going to try for number two? I have had an only child for almost 8 years now, and I have received that question so many times. And you know, for me, I do want to have another baby. I've been trying for a year. So it's pretty easy for me to answer that question. It's like, as soon as it'll happen for us is when we're going to have that baby. But if you only want to have one child, it might be really triggering for you that I'm going to be so bold as to assume that pretty often people ask you that question or try to push their belief that you should at least have 2 children because, I mean, come on, you're not a good American if you don't have 2.5 babies, right? But the thing is, you have every right to push that like white picket fence June Cleaver ideal out the window because ultimately it is absolutely your choice how many children you have. And of course, if you are parenting with a partner, that's a discussion that the two of you have together, but really it is nobody else's business. And this can be triggering for some people, but I also believe, you know, if you, the person watching this video, if you're the one that will be carrying this pregnancy, then I think it's even more your decision than anyone else's, even your partner's. Because, you know, if you have different fears about pregnancy or childbirth, if you've experienced sexual trauma, there's all sorts of things that could make carrying another baby really anxiety ridden for you. The idea of that brings up a lot. So again, if you'll be the one carrying the baby, ultimately it's up to you. And of course, if you're with a partner, it's nice to discuss it with them, but remember, it's your body. Okay, so where does that, like all that judgment come from when you let people know, yeah, actually we're only gonna have one child? Where does that come from? So one of the big places that it comes from is it's like that person is having resistance to something that is different from what they believe in. So for example, if they firmly feel that all children should have a sibling and you're not a full family until you have at least 2 kids, then if you're choosing to only have one child, even though I'm sure your decision has absolutely nothing to do with them, a lot of people interpret that as like a judgment on their choice to have more than one kid. And so they push against it. And, you know, a lot of people, even if it's just subconscious, they want you to be making the same choices as them because that validates their choices. So a lot of that judgment is just coming from that resistance to a different choice. You might also hear the thing that, you know, you're robbing your child of the opportunity to have a sibling. You know, here's the thing. There is no guarantee that having a sibling gives your child this like golden ticket to happiness. I know plenty of only children that are now adults that had a wonderful life. They have amazing friends that feel like they're siblings. And I also know people that have siblings and they are estranged from those siblings, and the people they feel closest to are a lot of their friends that they have chosen. So again, while of course having siblings can be an amazing part of life, it is not the only way to have an amazing life, to have really solid relationships. Okay, and the other myth is that only children will turn out to be self-centered, lonely, and spoiled. While we do not need a study to tell us that that is ridiculous, there have been studies about only children. There was one that was published in Social, Psychological, and Personality Science, and they found that only children are no more likely than children with siblings to become narcissists. And research has also found that only children typically end up to have the same amount and quality of friendships as children with siblings. So that myth is busted. Okay, so what to do? You know, if you fully know, like I only want one child, no question about it, then great. You don't have to listen to this next part. But if you're still like, I kind of think I only want to have one child, but I'm not really sure. One of the first things to do is to listen to your inner knowing or your gut instinct. When you get away from all the chatter of other people, even your partner in this first step, close your eyes and really tune in to what feels right to you. A lot of times one choice is going to feel a little bit more right than the other. And it's a big decision. So granted, like one 10-minute meditation is not going to magically give you the answer, but continually sitting with yourself, tuning into your gut instinct can help you figure out what feels right to you. And then of course, discussing your feelings, what's coming up with your child raising partner. And to remember that you reserve the right to change your mind. If you feel like right now that only having one child is right for you, and 2 years down the line you change your mind, that's fine. And nobody has the right to tell you, I told you so, and you'd want to have another kid. No, they don't get to say that. You have every right to change your mind. You can also decide what to say when people inevitably ask you about baby number 2. So you can kind of have some go-to lines like, you know what, we're still deciding, or we've decided to only have one child because that's what feels right for our family. And if they press you, you can just say, we made this decision because it feels right for our family. You don't have to give them any explanation. You don't have to get into this whole in-depth conversation with them about it, unless you want to, of course. And then finally, if you at this point only want to have one child, but you're like, maybe in the future, I do want to have more children. And if your biological clock is stressing you out, one option, and I know that this is an expensive option, is to freeze your eggs, because that essentially can pause the biological clock. So say you're, 38, and I'm just throwing out a number here. You're 38 and you're like, I might not want to have more kids for another 4 years or so. And a fertility doctor says, yeah, your eggs are still really good right now. You might want to freeze them. And then a few years later, you can use some of those frozen eggs. And it's important to note that if you do freeze eggs, to be able to use those eggs, you will have to go through IVF, which can be very expensive, but that is an option for you financially. It can be a good one. All right, if you have any questions about this topic or stories about this topic, about people pushing their opinions on you regarding how many children you should have, please include it in the comments below.